So the question still remains, who is the better man? It is that question that plagues even the minds of the athlete involved in this feud of the year.
ECW was a variety show. Most people look back at the company and they see blood and guts, but in reality, it was a place that hosted several types of wrestling styles at a high level. You could watch a Rey Mysterio perform in lucha libre and high-flying offense rare to an American audience at the time. You could see Taz, a hard-hitting, dump-you-on-your-head shoot-style athlete. You could see a Japanese buzzsaw in Tajiri, a Too Cold Scorpio, a Rob Van Dam, a Tommy Dreamer, a Sandman, the list goes on. And in the summer of 1995, Extreme Championship Wrestling would introduce Eddie Guerrero. Paired with Dean Malenko, the two would put on technical masterclasses for a rabid audience. These would come to be known as the Guerrero Malinko Classics. Eddie Guerrero would enter ECW in a big way, defeating Too Cold Scorpio for the ECW television title on his first night in the company. On that same night, Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit would lose the ECW tag team titles to the Public Enemy. Malenko had been part of the Triple Threat, a group with Benoit and the franchise Shane Douglas. Over his time there, he'd gained a reputation as one of the most talented technical wrestlers in the world. So whenever Eddie Guerrero put out a challenge saying that he was ready to take on anyone in Extreme Championship Wrestling, Malenko stepped up to answer. The two would meet for the first time in May 1995 at ECW Hostile City Showdown. The two would immediately click in the ring. It was the first time the two had ever wrestled each other, but the chemistry was instant. Lots of back and forth counters, heating up gradually with big moves being pulled out in an attempt to finish their opponent, but to no avail. This match would end in a time limit draw after 30 minutes of back and forth action. The match received a lot of praise for what it did, and they would immediately book the rematch for the next big event the following month, where once again the two would go to a 30-minute draw, recapturing the instant chemistry they had in their initial bout. Notably, on commentary they had a man billed as Peter Sinercha, calling the match with Joey Styles. Afterward, this man would be revealed as Taz, and this was in an effort to repackage him. During the early days of ECW, he was the Tazmaniac, a Tarzan, barbaric kind of cartoonish character that was fairly common to that era of wrestling. And with this second match, he was shown his knowledge for shoot holds and technical ability, transforming himself into the more recognizable human suplex machine. Following this, Paul Heyman would set up a match with Taz and Eddie Guerrero teaming together. They would be put against Too Cold Scorpio and Dean Malenko. We'd see Dean and Eddie mix it up once again during this series, and unfortunately, in one of the tag team matches, we'd see Taz have his neck broken in an unfortunate pile driver. I'm not sure where these tags were initially intended to go. However, I think a Malenko versus Taz in 1995 would have been fun to see, with Taz coming into his own, maybe defeating him and going after Eddie's TV title. However, moving forward, Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko would go head-to-head one more time to complete a trilogy of matches. Going into this match, Joey Styles would note on commentary that Malenko had stated that if he can't beat Eddie Guerrero tonight, he would no longer attempt a challenge for his title. Once again having an evenly matched contest, Eddie would hit a Frankensteiner going for a pin attempt, where Dean would counter and catch him slipping, getting the win over Eddie and winning the ECW television title, concluding the trilogy of matches. Eddie shakes his hand and gives the belt over to him, but in quick fashion he would let Malenko know that this feud isn't over yet. The two would have their next chapter in their feud only 1 week later, with Guerrero getting a rematch for the title he lost. This was one of the shorter matches that the two would have, only going about 11 minutes, allowing for a much tighter, quicker pace. Guerrero would use this to his advantage, and just like in their prior contests, Eddie would go for a Frankensteiner into a pin. Malenko would once again catch him with a counter, but this time Eddie was prepared for it and gave him back a counter of his own, pinning Malenko and regaining the ECW television title. With the series being all tied up, 2 time limit draws, and 2 men both holding a pinfall victory over each other, their final match would be scheduled. It would be a 2 out of 3 falls match set for August 1995. Before the match could take place, Eddie would face Too Cold Scorpio at an ECW house show, and Too Cold would defeat Guerrero, winning the ECW TV title from him. On the night of the final Guerrero Malinko Classic, Joey Styles would go to the ring and explain to the crowd that due to the nature of the relationship with WCW and New Japan Pro Wrestling, and the fact that Eddie and Dean had contracts with New Japan, it would mean that following this match, they would be heading to work for WCW. With their final ECW match set to take place, Malenko and Guerrero would go to the ring. Although they were leaving, the crowd still showed them a lot of respect, giving a standing ovation for the two wrestlers and chanting things like "Please don't go." As expected, it was an exceptional back and forth contest. Guerrero would get the first fall, Malenko would get the second. And with an interesting third fall, similar to their previous encounters, the two would exchange pinfall combinations, countering each other back and forth, and would end the match on a pinfall that saw both men's shoulders being flat on the mat. The referee of the match would declare the contest a draw and raise both men's hands, leaving the Dean Malenko and Guerrero Classic a stalemate, and some of the greatest technical wrestling that would ever take place on American soil and in Extreme Championship Wrestling.